Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain and welcome to the top. This time around, we're jumping right back into the green stuff as we take a look at the top 10 best male characters from a network full of them. As always, a top 10 list doesn't even account for a fraction of all the great characters Nickelodeon has provided us with over the years, so be sure to leave your own favorites down below. With all that said, let's kick things off with number 10.
It's gonna take some time.
Drake was always one of my favorite characters from the show that defined the network in the mid-2000s, but he also works on many levels too. He's not the smartest guy in the world, but he never makes it annoying, which is hard to pull off, and his relaxed guitar playing vibe is the perfect counterpoint to the more energetic and spazzy Josh. It would be easy to argue for him to be higher than 10, but I do think that he benefits a bit more than most from having a great cast around him, and let's not forget that he did a pretty great job on the show's theme song. James is at the center of some of the funniest moments from one of Nick's funniest shows. He's self-absorbed, overdramatic, and sometimes just absurd, but all those elements work within the context of a show that's inherently over the top. You'll notice that with the way it utilizes sound effects to drive humor and other not-so-subtle means. James feels like he's the character most embracing that comedic style and running full speed with it, and that makes him a pleasure to watch. Sokka is one of those characters that matures, grows, and defies expectations, sometimes even his own. He begins as just a would-be leader with natural wit, and slowly develops into the kind of person you want by your side when you're taking on the Fire Nation. The way they portray the quote-unquote powerless one in the group works really well within the context of this show, because with the exception of one episode, he never really complains or sulks about it, and just finds other ways to be useful. But he never shortchanges you on just being funny either, which is something I think Korra tried and failed to completely reproduce with Bolin, although he's definitely got his moments too. But even on the darkest days, Sokka finds a way to bring the light. It was tough trying to decide which of the two main iCarly boys would take a spot on this list, but after much deliberation, I decided on Spencer Shay for several reasons. Remember how I said Drake benefits from having a great cast around him? Well, Spencer is the kind of character that is great on his own and doesn't really need his interactions with other characters to overly define him. I assume most of you have seen this show and as a result have experienced his legendary zaniness and the way he seems to set everything on fire. But I can also relate to the state of life that he's in, trying to be mature while also trying to hold on to the unique qualities that make him who he is. That element alone would make him interesting, but the way he's always supportive and energetic and willing to help are big pluses. Depending on who you are, you'll probably either argue for Tommy Pickles or my favorite from the show, Chuckie Finster. The reason Chuckie is so high is because even though Tommy is the leader, I think Chuckie actually represents the core of the show a bit better. He's scared by almost everything, but that's perfectly understandable since he is just a toddler and the world is huge and can be scary. But the best moments come from him actually facing his fears for the sake of his friends or himself or whatever the situation may be. But at the end of the day, that makes him real and relatable. Would we all be as brave as Tommy, or as devil-may-care as Phil and Lil, or as cruel as Angelica growing up? Probably not. Chuckie is more of a gateway character into what being that young might actually feel like, for better and for worse.
Are you ready?
Some of you might not be the biggest fans of this show, but if you like this guy and you like this guy, chances are you'll like Chase too. He's not terribly complicated, he's mainly a genuinely nice guy who looks out for the people he cares about. I really like the way the show works in his feelings for Zoe into some of the plot points because it never struck me as overdone or underutilized. It hits a balance. And yes, he could have just told her how he felt a million different times, but trust me, it's harder than it looks, which also makes him relatable, similar to other characters on this list. That may be a minor point for some, but I think characters are most powerful when they can help inform us on how we would conquer a certain obstacle or handle a certain situation. You might not get such revelations from watching Logan, for example. If he just seems too plain or his hair too bushy for you to get into, that's understandable. But for me, he was exactly what this show needed.
Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?
The single greatest thing about the wacky, ridiculous world of Bikini Bottoms is far and away Squidward Tentacles. This show definitely has its moments, but most of the time, the situations are downright absurd, and Squidward serving as the kind of old grumpy man who doesn't want kids playing in his hypothetical lawn is always on point. But it's not just the fact that Squidward represents the more realistic underbelly of what living in such an underwater society might look like. It's also the fact that within that system, even he can experience moments of true joy and bliss. Need I remind anyone of arguably one of the best episodes of the show, where Squidward gets a band together to play the Bubble Bowl? It was one of those rare episodes where Squidward has to embrace the lunatics he's living with, and by doing so, he actually wins. Speaking of things shows needed, enter Uncle Iroh. Once first in line to become Fire Lord, then turned mentor to Prince Zuko in his quest to capture the Avatar. He doesn't develop in the same way as the other characters in the show, since he's an old man and is pretty much set on who he is. But the way we gradually learn more and more about his history sheds light and gives deeper meaning to his actions. He could have just been a lovable but lazy Fire Nation side character, but he's actually the greatest teacher in this show, if you've been listening to what he has to say. Every time he tells a story or teaches a lesson, it's so engrossing, and it really makes you think. And even though he's technically part of the Fire Nation, this show does well to capture the fact that not everybody on the other side is necessarily the enemy. Oh, here it goes! The shining symbol of classic 90s and early 2000s Nickelodeon. Kel just might be the funniest character to ever enter the network, and he does it in so many ways. Yes, he's absurd, but he also portrays it so well. Whatever role Kel the character has to fill at the time, he goes all in with it. Sometimes he has to break down and get emotional. Other times he has to act like a girl, but all of it's believable within the context of his character. Keenan obviously helps a lot as the show's brains, but Kel always finds a way to turn what could have otherwise been a pretty mundane situation into something hilarious and special. Even though he didn't return to Nickelodeon under the best circumstances, when you watch this show, you really understand why the network wanted him back. Talented, funny, engaging, Kel Kimble. But who bred him for the top spot? We'll get there. But first, some honorable mentions. Ironically enough, the single greatest thing about Avatar is not the last airbender himself, but the banished prince. Where do I even begin? He starts off as just another antagonist for the first couple of episodes. I didn't even like him at that point. But then the episodes kept coming, and his character kept growing and growing into a force you simply could not ignore. His troubled and complicated past alone would make him an interesting character, but it's also in the way his voice actor Dante Bosco perfectly captures the emotional nuances of the character that he plays. The rage feels real, the depression feels real, the confusion feels real, and just when you think he's turned over a new leaf and changed for good, Azula pulls him right back down. His entire arc works well, because it's not as simple as I used to be bad but now I'm good. It goes through several stages before he gets to a point where he's ready to join the Avatar and his team, and his arc as an individual character might just be one of the greatest ever. And yes, that statement isn't just limited to Nickelodeon or animated shows. Zuko is one of the all-time best developed characters on television, period. If you've watched this show all the way through, you know that. And if not, I'm not sure how much more praise I can heap on it before it starts getting redundant. Just watch it. Zuko is number one, so the list is done. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe for more, and share it all over social media. And don't forget to follow the Disney Brain on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Links down below. I know that I said that the Cheetah Girls 2 DCOM review would be coming next, but I've run into some complications with that video, so I'm putting it on hold for now. But there's a silver lining. Since so many of you requested Geek Charming, that's what we're diving into next. So either that DCOM review will come later this week, or the female version of this list. Haven't really decided yet, but lots to look forward to. Until then...
I was sad because I was afraid you lost your way.
I did lose my way.
But you found it again. And you did it by yourself. And I'm so happy you found your way here.
It wasn't that hard, Uncle. You have a pretty strong scent.